I'm going to score this up as a win. My prophecy was correct, more or less. People said, who do you think will become First Minister after Humza Yousaf? I said there'll be a contest. It will be Kate Forbes versus one other person. Doesn't matter who the other person is, and the other person will win. And that's sort of more or less what happens. Kate Forbes was looking at standing, but she probably realised that even if she was elected as SNP leader, she wouldn't be elected as First Minister. So really she couldn't win. So she dropped out. Now, what this has done is it's reignited the Kate Forbes debate and commentary in the media. And it's absolutely fascinating and it's absolutely chaotic because almost everyone gets it wrong when it comes to analysing and commentating on Kate Forbes. I mean, where do we start? This time we've got feminists saying the attacks on Kate Forbes are misogynistic. So when people are saying, oh, Kate Forbes' views are really old-fashioned, I don't like, they're saying there's actually misogyny. I mean, total nonsense. Look at John Mason. He's similar views in some ways. He gets absolutely slated as well. I mean, it's not misogyny. Right, the next one. People say, oh, Kate Forbes is attacked. It's because she's a Christian. They discriminate against Christians. Well, that's just not true. I mean, John Swinney is a Christian. Ross Greer identifies himself as a Christian. Wearing the Christian badge makes no difference whatsoever. It's holding certain views, particularly to do with life and sexuality. That's where people want to draw a line and want to hound people out of politics. Now, also you get people who say it's really unfair. Kate Forbes gets hounded for her Christian views. Humza didn't get hounded for his beliefs as a Muslim. Well, the reason for that is Humza doesn't believe controversial views as a Muslim. It's a token Muslim, maybe. I don't know how I'd like to put it. But he doesn't believe traditional Islamic teaching, so he doesn't hold the controversial views, so people don't go after him. It's as simple as that. It's not a double standard between Christians and Muslims in this case. Right, another thing you get is the SNP is discriminating on grounds of religion. That's just not true. The SNP is a political party. A political party can choose to adopt any set of policies and values that it likes. And it can accept or reject members by whatever criteria it wishes. Now, if Kate wanted to argue, if the SNP wants to be a broad party, they ought to allow her, with her views, to be part of it. That's a perfectly reasonable argument to make, but it's not religious discrimination or any other sort of sinister discrimination when a political party says, your views don't match our party, so no, you can't have this position, you can't be a member, you can't represent us. Every party is the same. Every party will reject people whose values don't align with their own. That's pretty straightforward, I think. Right, the next mistake people make is to think Kate Forbes has bravely spoken up for what she believes. She's a prophetic voice in the land. Well, that's not really capturing the full picture. Since Kate was elected in 2016 to the present, she's said virtually nothing whatsoever about her more controversial views as a Christian. Virtually, absolutely zero. Now, during the election, the leadership election campaign last year, she was put on the spot repeatedly by journalists, and they sort of forced out of her to actually give some sort of response on issues. And very early on, she said she would have voted against same-sex marriage, and all hell broke loose. I mean, the blue touch paper was lit, and there was just pandemonium. She was attacked viciously, which was appalling. But in subsequent interviews, she really covered up what she believes, to the point where I would say she said things about what she believed that were not true. She said that she didn't believe homosexual relationships are immoral. She said that she didn't believe abortion is immoral. I don't think that's what she really thinks. I think she believes one thing, but she said that she believes something else. Now, I might be wrong. Maybe Kate Forbes doesn't hold to the teachings of the Free Church of Scotland anymore. Maybe she's rejected them. I don't know. But as far as I can tell, that doesn't seem to be the case. And I think no matter what your strategy is, it's not okay to be dishonest about what you believe. And I'm sad to say that I believe that is what Kate Forbes did. Now, often when I talk to Christians about this, it's quite interesting, the response. The response is quite often that they're just either unable or unwilling to accept it. It's like, no, I don't want to know. I don't want to hear about that. Kate Forbes is brilliant. She's a Christian. And so it's fantastic. I don't want to hear about the fact that she denied things what she believes. I don't want that. I want things to be nice and clear cut and simple. I'm on Kate Forbes' side. She's a Christian, and that's it. Don't confuse me with all this other information. And then that's quite a dangerous attitude for, well, in particular Christians to take, to regard someone as like beyond criticism, as flawless, if you like, because people are not like that. In my own view, as I say, for example, the value of human life in the womb is not something that should be neglected for strategic reasons. Another concern I have here, a lot of maybe younger people in particular, they look to Kate Forbes and they're looking to her as an example of how you can get involved in politics. Look at the way Kate Forbes did it. And they were thinking, oh, maybe I could do the same thing. The way Kate Forbes did it was, I say, saying pretty well nothing whatsoever about her distinctive Christian views. And then when it comes to the crunch and you put on the spot, to obscure them, to, well, deny them, basically. So I fear there's an awful lot of young people looking at that thinking, oh, that's how you do it. I'm going to follow in Kate's footsteps, and that is a concern from my point of view. So Kate's done this deal with John Swinney, and it's a good job she did, actually, because if a leadership contest had gone ahead within the SNP, it would have been absolute warfare. I mean, it would have destroyed the SNP. I mean, they're in a fair mess already. It would have been appalling. Had she won, then I think a significant number of the MSPs would have defected to the Green Party. She wouldn't have been able to be elected as First Minister in any case by the MSPs because the Greens would have voted against her. So she couldn't win. But when she said, oh, I'm considering standing, that strengthened her hand. That gave her some bargaining chips, if you like. And she cashed those in with John Swinney in exchange for, well, I'm not quite sure, a place in the cabinet, a Deputy First Minister, or whatever. She's back in the inner circle of the SNP and of the government. That is what's going to happen. Now, therefore, Kate Forbes will keep herself in the public spotlight. She'll maintain a public profile, and that will be helpful in terms of a future bid to be leader of the SNP or First Minister, which might not be the same thing before too long. Will she exert influence within the cabinet, within the government? Well, if we look at the period when she was in it before, who knows what went on behind the scenes, but as far as I can see, the policies of the Scottish government were as unaligned with Christian principles, let's say, as you could possibly imagine. So I can't see any evidence that Kate Forbes actually exerted any influence within the Scottish government. I mean, look at the gender recognition reform, for example. Went ahead regardless. So I'm not sure Kate will exert any influence this time either. But let's watch. Let's see. I mean, one issue coming up where Kate will be extremely voluble will be assisted suicide. I mean, all the Christian MSPs will go overboard on that. They'll speak passionately and loudly and clearly on it because it's an issue where there's no personal risk. You're not called a something phobe for opposing assisted suicide. So I think all the Christian MSPs who are normally quite timid, careful, wise as they might call it, you'll see them having an absolute field day over that issue. Then it will be back to normal again on the more controversial ones. So Kate's compromised in some ways there in order to, this deal with John Swinney in order to be in the cabinet again. Now, my view is that Christian moral teaching can play a vital role in promoting a flourishing society. Whereas the culture with a lot of people in the political commentators and in politics is that the ideal Christian is the one who, well, they may have some of these weird, unusual views, but the ideal Christian is the one who has those views, but those views make no difference whatsoever to the way they think the country should be run or what they think laws should be. That's what they think. I mean, and John Swinney was asked about this by a journalist, and the journalist said to John Swinney basically, look, last year in the campaign, you said more or less Kate Forbes is not fit to be First Minister because she's got these horrific views, so she's not suitable. So what's changed? And John Swinney replied by saying that Kate Forbes this week voted for abortion clinic buffer zones. So he said that should silence those who have any doubts about a person's faith influencing their decisions on behalf of the whole country. So John Swinney is basically saying, look, people, don't worry. Kate is going to vote in a way that is totally contrary to her Christian principles. So fear not. She's the right sort of Christian, the sort who, doesn't act in accordance with the Christian views. So pro-life activists in the vigils, as far as I'm aware, they are all Christians, and they might end up arrested, fined, imprisoned, even some of them, because they're trying to save the unborn. Well, Kate said, yeah, lock them up. Let's get these pro-life activists locked up, these Christians. And John Swinney says this just shows that Kate Forbes, maybe she's changed, maybe she's reformed. She's the right sort of Christian after all. And I haven't heard Kate Forbes saying, well, could I just clarify what John was saying? I don't actually agree with him on that. I don't think the right sort of Christian is the sort who leaves their values outside the Parliament. But I haven't heard Kate object to that in any way. I mean, that sort of line that John Swinney was taking, it's like that Jacob Rees-Mogg takes this sort of line as well. I'm a Catholic, so I believe this. But don't worry, folks, I'm not going to change anything in the country. I'm a Catholic. I think abortion is the taking of innocent human life. Really appalling. But don't worry, I'm not going to do anything about it. I don't want the law to change. It can just carry on regardless, because I'm the right sort of Christian who actually doesn't try and change anything on the basis of their most precious beliefs. Now, some people, commentators have said, Kate Forbes has broken new ground. She's shown that it's possible to be in the high levels of government despite holding fairly conservative Christian views. I would say sort of yes and no to that. The no side is, but at what cost? If it's at the cost of, but you better not try and act on them, or propound them, or try and persuade people of them, then that's obviously too high a price to pay, and what's the point in being there? Now, John Swinney, I wonder what compromises he's offered. I mean, has he said to Kate, if you're going to not stand, what I'll do is I'll take the rshp.scot sex education resources that are corrupting and vulgar and trivialising, and I'm going to go back to basics. I'm going to scrap those, and we're going to come up with something new. We'll make that part of our deal, shall we, Kate? How about that? Anything like that happened? Has John Swinney compromised? Has he offered anything in this deal? As far as I'm aware, nothing, apart from giving Kate a top job. What will that job be? Well, could be Finance Secretary again, Deputy First Minister, both, Environment, maybe, Welfare, whatever. Oh yeah, very possibly. I'll tell you what it won't be. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'll tell you what it won't be. I don't think it could possibly be education. It couldn't possibly be, equality and human rights. Maybe not even health. That might be a bit tricky as well, because the NHS is involved in gender clinics and abortion, etc., etc. So I think it'll be the ones where Kate's values have no influence. That's the way governments deal with Christians with conservative, socially conservative values. They put them in jobs where those values are going to make no difference to them. That's generally the tactics. So just wait and see which job Kate is given and see if I'm right. Right, an interesting question that I've mulled over in this is, how did Swinney get chosen to be the anointed one in this leadership election? Is there an inner circle that really runs the SNP? And they got together and said, is it Nicola Sturgeon or whoever? No, they say, well, we think it should be John Swinney, so let's tell everyone it's going to be John Swinney. And everyone else says, that's what they've said from on high, we better do it. Or is it that this just emerged organically? Let's say there's some huge WhatsApp group with 50 SNP politicians in, and someone says, I think it would be good if Swinney did it. It ended up that they were virtually all saying, yeah, I think you're right. And the decision got made that way. I don't know. But it does seem to be a decision was made by the SNP, by whatever process, that John Swinney was the person to go forward. It doesn't feel like it was just John Swinney's decision. It feels like the party itself anointed him for this role. Well, I watched a bit of John Swinney's launch speech. I have to say, I thought he was a bit better than he usually is. But he's not exactly a passionate, inspirational speaker, I would say. What are his values? I really don't know. I can't think of any time ever when I think he's shown some sort of independent thought. He tends to respond with management babble about processes and procedures, details. He doesn't seem to have a real cutting edge in a debate. I think he's nowhere near as good as Kate Forbes as a politician presenting himself in public. Also, think with John Swinney, he's a bit like Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf in that he's a bit nippy. Like when people criticise the SNPs, criticise the government, he responds in a way that is a bit offended. Like, how dare you criticise the SNP? by which he's probably imagining that's the same thing as saying, how dare you criticise Scotland? So sort of get a bit angry about that. So it's maybe not so passionate about the real issues, but when it comes to people criticising him or the SNP, I say it becomes a bit nippy and very defensive. Now, John Swinney, of course, calls himself a Christian, as lots of MSPs do. But yeah, John Swinney is the special sort of Christian who's happy with the killing of the unborn, like corrupting children with like disgraceful sex education resources, the whole transgenderism package pushed to children in schools. He's up for all of that, but he says he's a Christian. I remember seeing him once at home, maybe it was during lockdown, making some video. There's a big Bible on the shelf behind him. I don't know if it ever moves from there, but yeah, he certainly calls himself a Christian. I mean, he's arriving with plenty of baggage. I mean, I won't go into detail here, but I mean, the named person scheme, that was one of the most infamous disasters of the whole SNP government. John Swinney was right at the forefront of that. The RSHP.Scot sex education resources, John Swinney was at the forefront of pushing that. He was Education Secretary at the time. Gender recognition reform, again, he voted for that. It was interesting in his leadership launch. He was asked about, a question about gender, and he just refused to answer, wanted to brush that aside, which is interesting. Now, some people in the family party have said they think John Swinney looks a bit like me. We think it's very gracious of them, paying a compliment to an opponent like that. So what does the future hold in the Scottish Parliament? Well, I think watching debates in the chamber, First Minister's question, it's going to be pretty dull, I think. And in terms of policy, it will just be the same as it's going to be under Labour in the future, same as it has been under the SNP in the past. Are they going to be slightly reined in terms of their progressive policies? Maybe they might think we could do without another controversy like that. Maybe conversion therapy ban. But I tend to think probably not. I think things will carry on as normal because the huge majority of MSPs within the SNP want to go in that direction, and the Greens will be pulling them that way as well. Now, in Nicola Sturgeon, we had a female supremacist and an LGBT fanatic. In Humza Yousaf, we had someone who was a sort of race warrior, and religion, Islam was a massive influence in his political values. John Swinney, what's the equivalent? Nothing, as far as I can tell. Maybe independence. I mean, is that about it? I don't know. Maybe within the years to come we will learn a little bit more about what John Swinney really believes, if he believes anything. But all this talk of leaders, let's not get too carried away with it. And the SNP's policies are evil. So I couldn't possibly represent them. I couldn't possibly join them. I couldn't possibly vote for them. And which leaders they have in place doesn't change that one little bit. Right, hope that was interesting. Do join the Scottish Family Party via the link below. Thanks for watching.